Okay, sure.
Let's pick it up on the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, and we're going to start with Abba Umna, which is, I would say, about 12 lines up before the end of the daf. The first word in the line is Shiny Hassam.
Okay, got it.
Abba Umna. And Umna is the Talmudic word for a make his dam, basically a surgeon, but in those days, the focus of surgery was on bloodletting, which was good for high blood pressure. Havi Asile Shlama Mimesifta Derakia Kol Yoma. On a daily basis, he received a baskol from Chomayim that said to him, Shalom Aleichem. Ulabaye, who was a contemporary, Kol Mala Yoma de Shabsa. Only on Fridays, once a week. Le Rava Kol Mala Yoma de Kippura. Rav only got it once a year. Havakachol Shadaite de Abaye. Abaye was very upset about this. Like, am I, as we say in parlance, chop liver? Why is it that, this Abba, who is only a surgeon, he's not even a scholar in Torah, as far as we know, and yet he gets a visit on a daily basis. I have to wait once a week. We'll see later on that Rava got even more upset. Amruleh. So somehow they got a voice from Shamayim that answered Abaye's question and calmed him down. There's nothing for you to get upset about. Lo matis lemevet ka'uvde. You could not possibly, because you're not in that position that he's in, live up to his level. Mayavi uvde, what was his level, his great level, that he deserved a daily baskol shom alecha? The Abba Umnin. The Chiavi Avid Milsa, when he was involved in bloodletting, he was very makpid on sneus, and therefore he machis gavre lechud v'noshi lechud. He had a separate room for the women and a separate room for the men, that they shouldn't mix together. And furthermore, for Islay Levusha, he had a special cloak that a woman could wear over her body, the Ispe Karna, and this garment had like an opening for where he could put in the pipe for the Hakozas Adam, Davis Bezia Kikusile. And because of these holes that were exactly the size of his surgical knife, so when a woman would come, Havi Malbishla, he told her to put on this cloak, and he would do the hakaza through that opening, that he wouldn't have to ask her in any way to undress, and he wouldn't look at her. The Islay duchta ditzniya. And furthermore, because of his tznius, he had a place outside in a very private area. Dishadi be patish dishakil. He would have a kind of a receptacle where people would put in the money to pay him his fee, and he didn't even ask for the fee. The Islay, anyone who had money to pay him, Shadi Bey, the Lesbe lo michsa. He didn't want to embarrass anybody. And if somebody didn't have the most to pay him, they wouldn't be embarrassed, because no one knew who put the money into this pushka. I mean, you're talking about a real tzaddik here. If a Talmud Chacham would come for Hakozas Dam, Agra b'nei lo shakel, he wouldn't even take any money from him. He refused to be reimbursed for his services. Ubasa dekai, and when the Talmud Chacham finished, and he was a little bit weak after everyone's weak after bloodletting, Yoyev le pshiti, this Abba Umna would give him some pshiti mohos, money, the Amalei zil bri nafshach. go buy yourself something lavri. Lavri means to get back to yourself. Now, when Abai heard this Baskol, he was a little bit maybe skeptical. Perhaps it wasn't genuine, or perhaps they exaggerated. He couldn't believe that this Abba Umna was such on a high level. So therefore, he tested him. Yom Achad, one day, Shader Abai Zuga de Rabbanan Lemivdike. He sent 2 Talmidei Chachamim to check out this guy Abba Umna. Is he for real? Osvinu v'achinu v'ashkinu. When they came to the house of the surgeon of Abba, he fed them, he gave them to drink. After sitting them down, he really, like Avram Avinu over the guests, he stood over them. Umachle bistakre starke belela. Now, belela means at night, and bistarke are what we call, what's the word in English? It's coming. 1 second. Mattresses. Mattresses.
Okay.
Okay, so he had mattresses, and he sort of folded up pillows and cushions made of wool, and they were placed apparently on these mattresses. Basically, the bottom line is he made it very, very comfortable. So we'll take a look now on Chaf Beis Amud Aleph. Litzafra, in the morning, karchinu v'shaklinu, these talmidim started rolling up. Karchinu means likroch is to roll. Dolalu hatalmidim es matzoyat semer. And, these mattresses, they were able to roll them up and take them. They went out into the marketplace as if they were going to sell them on the open market. Chutzpah, imagine. Not only does Abba Umna offer them free food and free drink and a place to sleep, it's like, the person who goes into the dining room in the hotel room and he steals all the silverware. They're stealing all this good stuff, which they're going to sell in the market. Ashkechinu, there was an encounter between Abba Umna and the Talmidim in the Shuk. Amrule, they said to him, L'shaimei mar hechi shavu. Can our master please give us an evaluation, an estimation of how much these mattresses are worth, so that when we sell them, we won't get ripped off. We'll get that full value. And here's where they wanted to check him out, if he would suspect them as being thieves. Amalahu, Abba Umnan says, Hachi b'hachi. This is what they're worth. Amrulay, they responded, Vidilma shavu tfei. Maybe they're worth even more. This is what I paid when I bought them, and therefore I know for sure this is their market value. These mattresses belong to you. And we took them from you. We were really just testing you out to see if you will accuse us of thievery. The Talmidim said to Abba Umna, tell us, what did you think of us that here we are walking out with your mattresses and we're trying to figure out how much they're worth to sell them on the open market? Amalu Amina. So Abba Umna was really Makayim, the halacha of heavy donis chaver lekaf skus. Pidyon shvuim iklalu l'rabbanan. There must be a very dangerous and urgent need to gather
Right.
funds to free someone from captivity. And they were embarrassed to tell me directly to give these matzon. And therefore they came to sleep in my house in order to take them and sell them for the purpose of Pidyon Shvuyim. Later, Talmidim said, Hashta. Okay, now that we checked you out and we see you're for real, you've lived up to your reputation. We don't want to take away your mattresses. This is all just a ploy. Nishkalinumar, take them back. Hamalahu, no. Abba said to him, forget it. Me'ahu shaita, from that moment that I was convinced that you took these matzos for purpose of Pidyon Shvuyim, aschinu midatayu litstaka. I already was Mesiach Das. I had no intention to get them back, and I gave them to tzedakah. If I don't want to take them back, and I think he was implying that if you want to give it to tzedakah, that's your issue. But I'm not taking it back. Here, the Mefarshim are bothered by the principle of Dvarim Shebelev Lo Avi Dvarim, and therefore, say it again.
Isn't that the concept of Yeyush? They're basically, right? When you give up on something, someone else can take it.
Well, let me just figure out exactly when. So let me just get the sequence here. Just let me think for a second. So again, I think that you're taking it for the purpose of tzedakah, and therefore I make a decision in my mind that I'm giving it for tzedakah. So you're asking, it should be effective because of Yeush. I'll tell you what I think. I mean, maybe your question, Ira, is better than my answer, but Yeush only works when the Ganav actually steals something with the intention of maintaining possession of it. But if the Ganav himself only took it in order to give it back to me, he was just playing games with me, then I don't think my Yeush would be Chal. Anyway, I'm just pointing out that there's a long discussion about this regarding the principle of Dvarim Shebelev Lo Havi Dvar. And the Rishonim want to say that really his decision in its heart to give these matzos to tzedakah was not really binding. This whole thing was midas chasidus.
Right.
Now we get to Rava. Avi kacholish daite de Rava. Rava was in a state of tsar. Why is it that he only gets Shalom Aleichem from the Baskol once a year on Erev Yom Kippur? And not only that, he was even embarrassed in the presence of Abaye, because if he compares himself to Abaye, Abaye got a weekly visit every Erev Shabbos. Amrulay, so he got a message from up on high. I'm not exactly sure how these messages are transmitted. I don't know. Mistayach de Kamagnis Akula Krava. Mistayach means Dailacha. You know what? You don't need to get an extra reward, which might, in a sense, detract from your zchuyot, because your zchuyot are protecting the entire city. I have a long footnote over here. Rava was Rosh Hashiva of a city called Machoza, and he got a bracha from Rav Yosef that he would become the head of the entire city. And after Abai died, Rava was appointed the head honcho, the leader of the entire city. Even the Talmidim of Abai came to learn by Rava. And somehow, even though amongst the people of that city, which is called Machoza, there were quite a few Rishayim, but nevertheless, the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah that Rava was able, with his chiyot, to protect them. Now, the difficulty is, what's the connection between the fact that Rava protected the entire city and the fact that he only got a visit from the Baskol once a year on Erev Yom Kippur? So if we have time later on, I mean, there's a whole long discussion about this. Okay, now we go on to another story. Rav Broka, Chozah. He came from a place called Chozah. Havishchicha b'shuka debei lefet. He would very often frequent the marketplace in a place called Bei Lefet. Vavishchiach Elio Gabe. Elio Hanavi would come to him on a regular basis and meet him there in that marketplace. Amalei, so Rabroka turns to Elio Hanavi. Ika by Shuka Bar Alma Diasi. Is there anyone in this shuk? Show me one person who will inherit Olam Haba. Now the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin, Kol Yisrael Yesh Lehem Chelik Olam Haba. And there's a commentary on the Mishnayos in Sanhedrin called the Torah Chaim. He writes, Hainu Dafka Liachar Shemeis. After a person dies, and he undergoes what's called Chibur HaKever and Gehenom. So together with Misa and all these Onchim, which generate atonement for him, he becomes a Ben Olam Haba. Rav Broka was asking, is there someone here who's alive now? And as he is, without all the suffering of death and post-death, post-human suffering, could now guarantee himself a place in the world to come. Amalei, so Elio Hanavi said to him, "Lo, there's not one person here in the shuk. Don't even bother looking." It's a little bit of a sad prognosis. Adahachi v'hachi, but while they were having this dialogue, Chazalahu Gavra, Elio sees a person who comes into the shuk, and this person, Davisiam Masani Uchmin, he was wearing black shoes. And apparently the Jewish people did not go that far, although, you know, they were grieving over the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, but they didn't go as far as to wear black from head to toe. So the shoes maybe were white, or maybe the shoelaces were white. This guy was wearing black shoes. However, lo rami chuta tchelta beglive. He did not put tcheles, meaning tzitzis, in his beged. There's a checkered record here. You know, on the one hand, he's a person who wears black, indicating his avelus, but on the other hand, he's not even wearing tzitzis. Amalei, Elio said to Abroka, Hi bar alma diasi. If you're looking for someone who has a share in the next world, it's this fellow. I don't think we know his name. It's too bad because he was a great tzad. Amalei. I'm sorry, Riot Basrei. So Broka is running after this guy. Got to catch him and find out what's the secret that he had, that he merited Olam Haba. Amalei, my ovada. What exactly is your occupation? Amalei zil ha'idn v'tolamach. I can't talk to you now. Come tomorrow. L'machar. The next day, Rav Broka meets this fellow. Amalei, my ovada. Well, what do you do? Amalei zantukna ana. The word zandukna is Aramaic for a prison guard. And in those days, the prisons belonged to the king. And this individual, who is anonymous, we don't know his name, he was in charge of the prisoners. The Asarna. If, let's say, Chas v'shalom, some Jewish people are guilty, or at least they're being accused by the king, and they're thrown into the kling, so what do? Asarna gavri luchud b'nashi luchud. Again, the same theme that we saw earlier with regard to the Uman by the name of Abba. Here too, we see it in the fact that the men and women are separated. You get the impression that even back in the old days, 2,000 years ago, in the prisons, the men and the women were mixing together. Sounds like something very contemporary. You can't have separate bathrooms for each gender, But in any event, this fellow was very careful to separate the men from the women. But that's only the beginning of the story. V'ramena puryai enhani lahani. And I place my bed between the men's section and the women's section, to guarantee that no violation of any Isur should take place. If a Jewish girl, is incarcerated, again, it wasn't rare because the king, he would throw Jews. Anyway, Yoav Nachrim Allah Eine. I noticed that the non-Jewish inmates were putting their eyes on him. They wanted to have some sort of relationship with him, if you know what I mean. Is Masarna Nafshoy Matzlino La. I put my life on the line to save this girl. Yom Achad Havasnara Murasa Gabon. On one particular occasion in the jail, in the county prison, I guess you'd say, there was a married woman, a young woman. Nara Murasa means that she was between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, and she was married off. And Yoav Bu Nachrim an Einayu. And I observed that the Goyim had put their eyes on her. They wanted to use her for their own pleasure. The Shakli, I took Durdaya de Chamra, and these are sediments of wine, red wine, and the color is red like blood. Ushdaile b'shipula, and I poured them into the bottom of her garments. The Amri, and I told the Goyim, this is a kesem of dam. The distanahi, and it was very repulsive. So they didn't know that he had fooled them, and this was not dam that came out of her body. They thought it was dam. But in truth, it was just, the red sediments of wine. Amalei, so a broker asks this anonymous person, my time lesacha chuti. Why aren't you wearing tzitzis? And not only that, the ramis misani uchmi. And why do you wear black shoes? We Jews don't wear black shoes. So in other words, this fellow who was in charge overseeing the prisons, he looked like a guy. He wasn't wearing tzitzis. He was wearing black shoes like the guy.
Right.
On Malay, he said, this is what I have to do. I go in and out amongst the goyim, and I have to dress like them. Why? I'm going what we call undercover. I'm an undercover agent for the Jews. I cannot appear as a Jew. And why is that so critical? When they speak amongst themselves quietly and they're schmoozing about the latest news, which is not Corona in those days, but it was about a gzera that against the Jews, then once I hear this, I notify the rabbis, because they will mavakesh rachamim, and they will be mavatel gzera. The broker continues and asks him the following question: my timer ki amina lochana my uvdach amar lizil ha'idna v'tolamachar. When I asked you what's your story, why did you push me off for a day? Tell me to come the next day. Omar le, he says, "Vahi shaita gazru gzeirasa." Just at that moment that I saw you, the goyim had decreed a brand new decree against the Jewish people. The Amina, I said, Bereisha, the first thing on my agenda that's absolutely urgent is not to answer questions, but Ezel v'ashmalu l'Rabbanan. First, I got to go and be mashmiya to the Rabbanan. Dilma rachme alai demils. Maybe they'll ask for rachman from Hashem, the Rabbanan, and they'll stave off or cause the invalidation of this decree. I had no time to schmooze with you. It's very nice that you wanted to engage me in a question and answer period, but I had some more urgent items on the agenda to take care of. Adahachi v'hachi. Again, this is still part of the same story of Reb Broka. So Reb Broka and Eliyahu Hanavi are in the shuk of Beit Lafat. Asu Hanach Shrei Achi. Two brothers came in. Amalei, Eliyahu turns to Rabbi Broka and he says to him, Hanach Nami B'nei Alma Di Asibim. These two brothers also have guaranteed for themselves a place in the world to come. Azal Gabayu, immediately Rabbi Broka wants to find out, like, what's so special about these two brothers? What do you do with your lives? Starts inquiring. Amrule, the brothers responded, Inshi Bidoche Anan. We are, what's it called? Comedians. We are comedians. And we lift up the spirits and bring joy to those who are atzuvim, who are sad. Imagine, these guys are badchanim. They're jokesters. That's what they do for a living. Real comedians.
Yeah.
And yet they have a share in the world to come. Why? Because they bring a smile on the face of those who are upset. Inami, Ichazina Biktre, the Islu Tigra Badayu. If I chance upon two people that have some sort of altercation, Tarchinon, I make that extra effort and I relate or recite Divrei Schok, Divrei Simcha, Vavdidalu Shloma, and somehow it makes peace amongst them. Okay, the Mishnah says, Kol Elu Masriyim B'chol Makom. The Mishnah gives a whole list of sort of calamities, not the worst calamities, but a little bit lesser of a case of calamities. And amongst them, there's locusts and a different type of locust, and there are wild beasts that are out there. And there's those enemies that are threatening the Jewish people with sword, to kill them with sword. And in any of these cases, the Mishnah says, Masriyan Aleim. We cry out. Why? Because all these cases are what we classify as Makkah Mehaleches. Now, this Miriam here, according to the Mishnah on Daf Yud Ches, is accompanied by fasting. So it's Misanin Umirian al Atziras Kishavim. However, here's the difference between Atziras Kishavim and other tzaros. With regard to Atziras Kishavim, there's an entire seder of 3 and then 3 and then 7. But in these other tzaros, when there's an immediate danger, immediately we go to Miriam. That's our first stop. We don't have time to foot drag with this fast and that fast. Okay. Tanra Bana. We learned in a Bryce, Al Elu Masriyim B'chol Makom. Al Shidafon. Shidafon is a kind of like a very strong wind, almost like a tornado. Bala Yerokon. Yerokon, I think, is some sort of a creature that attacks the vegetables. Let me just see in the English how he translates Yerokon.
I think it's yellowing.
Yellowing?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. Do you know? You have to look this up in a dictionary. Just 1 second. Arba is locust. Chassil is another kind of locust. Al Chaya Ra that we know, like let's say, for example, a lion. Rabbi Kiva Omer Al Shidafon Val Yirakon B'Kolshu. I guess this is very, very dangerous, and therefore, Miriam even B'Kolshu. Second. Imnira afilu gak ma'achi dafano yurakon masrin. Arbev chasil, which are very dangerous, they attack the tfuah. Afilu onira b'eretz Yisrael al kanaf echad. Even if they only see one locust Masrian alein. Yes, this is already dangerous. 1 second. One-winged creature. Oh, one-winged creature. That's not how he has it in the Masechet. Masechet says you see one locust. That's called kanaf echad. And in the English translation, he's saying one-winged creature of either of these species. Maybe it comes out to be the same. Then it says, "Afilo nira b'eretz Yisrael kanaf echad masriyan alein." Tana Rabbana, we learned to the Brisa, Haya Ra'a Chaya Ra Sha'amru, when the Chachamim said that Masriyan, we make a big fast day out of the fact that we see a wild beast, Ein Bizman Shehi Mishulechas. This only applies if she is Mishulechas, meaning we can tell that she was sent by the heavens to destroy human life. Then Masriyan Oleha, and that will be Mavatel L'Gzera. But if there's no reason to assume that this animal, this wild beast, was sent min hashamayim, it's just a regular behavior of that beast, Ein Masriyan Oleha. We don't have to get concerned about it. So immediately, the Bryce has to explain, Ezehi Mishuleches, which means that we know it's unusual. It's not al pi derech hateva. It was sent by Shamayim. The Ezehi Eino Mishuleches. When do we say that it's normal? Nireis ba'ir. If a wild beast shows up in the middle of the urban center, that's Mishulachas. It's a chaya does not go into the yishuv of Bnei Adam. I remember, you remember that video during the quarantine at the beginning of COVID when they showed you animals all over the place?
Yeah,
you remember that? I don't remember
yeah.
which country. I think they went from one country to the other. There were elephants and God knows what in the streets. I mean, that's something min hashamayim. I lived in New York for 25 years. I never saw a lion in New York. And I saw people, whatever. Anyway, so Mishulachas means we can tell that it's Gzeira min hashamayim, and we have to be Masriya. However, besada, if we're out in the forests or in the fields, that's where these animals inhabit those areas, and in Mishulachas, it's natural to see them. However, by Yom, Mishulachas. Balayla Eina Mishulachas. These animals show up usually at night when the people are not around. But during the day, they don't show up. And if they do show up, again, we don't know. The Gemara can analyze whether the animals that show up by day are also in the city. Usually, an animal is afraid of two men, but in this case, the animal was not afraid of the two men. But nechvas b'pneihem, if she's afraid of two men and she runs away, then eina mishulachas. Tarfa shnei b'nei adam, if she killed two human beings, never. The achla echadem, but she only, after killing two people, she only ate one of them for dessert, for dinner. Mishulachas, because if the animal wasn't so hungry, why did it kill two people? It must be a sent from heaven. Achla shneim eina mishulachas. But if this animal killed two human beings and ate up their flesh, both of them, he killed both of them, and ate both of them, then it's eina mishulachas. Then it's within the bounds of nature. Also, legag, if the animal goes up into the house and takes a baby out of the cradle, that's something that's beyond nature. This is a davar she'eino matzui klal. It certainly is exer. So the Gemara immediately asks the following contradiction. Ha gufa kasha. Amrit, you said at the beginning, nirasa ba'ir mishulachas, that if the animal shows up in an urban center, it must be unusual, and it was sent by God. And that implies, you didn't qualify it, whether it's during the day or night. It doesn't show up in the urban centers. But afterwards you said that by Yom mishulachas, balayla ena mishulachas. It sounds like ena mishulachas even in the city. So you just told me that if we find an animal in the city even at night, that's called mishulachas. But the implication is that Laila ena mishulachas. Lo kasha achi komar. This is what the Bryce had in mind. Nirasa ba'ir bayom. So now we have two strikes against it, meaning there are two reasons now that combine to demonstrate that this is chutz miderech hateva. Number one, the animals running around in the city, and number two, it's during the light of day. Mishulachas. Then we know this is unusual. This is coming from the heavens. But ir balayla. But if the animal sneaks into the city at night, maybe the animal, like for example, I remember I was in the Rockies, and one of the rangers, a woman, in the whole uniform, she told us the story. They had a grizzly bear, not alive, but the skin, and she told us that this bear smelled, the barbecue and came from who knows where. So sometimes, if they smell something good, this wild animal will show up even in the city, but at night is eina mishulachas. In other words, people are not around in the streets at night. Most people are locked up in their homes at night. And therefore, these wild animals will come into the city if they smell some good food at night. So that's not mishulachas. Inami, basode afilu bayom eina mishulachas. If it's basode, then even during the day, that's not unusual. So the animals will show up by day in the sod. So again, getting back to our brisa, when we said that nireis be'ir is mishulachas, that's nireis bayom. So again, you have two reasons that combine that overlap. It's number one, it is nireis bayom, and number two, it's in the city. So it's in the city during the day. But now the Gemara asks another stira in the brisa. Rasa shnei bnei adam. If the animal sees two people in the sadeh, v'ratzas achreim, and she runs after not one person but two people, mishulachas, that's not natural. So the Gemara asks the following question based on a diuk. Ha omedes. If let's say she doesn't jump and run after them, but she's just simply standing in there, in the animal is standing exactly where it is, frozen to the ground, but it doesn't hide itself. Eino mishulachas. That could be natural. The animal doesn't have to run away. I'm sorry. It's only if the animal runs after them, that's considered unnatural, but it doesn't mean that the animal has to run away from them. It could be the animal will hold its own, stand in its own place. And that's natural. But Hadar Amrit, afterwards you said, Nechbais mipneim eina mishulachas. That if she's afraid of the two people, and she runs away or she hides herself, that's considered natural. Ha omedes, but if she's not afraid of the two men and she holds her own, is mishulachas. That's not natural. Lo kasha kan bisoda smucha liagam, the kan bisoda she'ena smucha liagam. So when the Brisa says that only if she runs after these two people, that's unnatural. But if she stands her own, that's natural. That's Eina Mishuleches. That's a case, Mishulachas, that's a case of Besode Hasmuchali Agam, and the field is close to marshlands. In Hebrew, that's called a bitza. And this is where that's our natural habitat. Sometimes she goes out a little bit into the field, a nearby field, but that is where she likes to be. That's Makoma, Regila. So she doesn't run away from people. She thinks that if they start running after her, she'll know immediately where to flee, and she'll go into the Agam where the people can't go into. So she's very familiar with the Agam, and it offers her a kind of natural protection. And therefore, if she holds her own and doesn't move from the spot, that doesn't prove that there's something unusual going on, because she's very comfortable and the beast is protected by the Agam. If on the other hand she goes running after the two people, that makes her a shliach of the Shamayim. Khan. Now we get to the other brisa that says that if she hides amongst people, that's natural, implying that if she stands her own, that's unusual. That's min hashamayim. That's besod she'ena smucha liagam. Now the Gemara has a third stira. Tarfa shnei bnei adam ke'echad v'yachla echad mehem. If she preys on two human beings, but she only eats one of them, that's unusual. That's min hashamayim. Shneim, but if she devours two people, nebuch, eino mishulachas. It must be that she was very hungry and she needed to eat up two corpses in order to satiate her hunger. We just said in the Brisa that if this beast runs after two people, that's unusual. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether she rips them apart, whether she consumes them or not. That piece in the Brisa, that if she eats one of them and not the other one, that's called unusual, that's called mishulachas. But if she runs after them, that's not called mishulachas. That's a chaya of agma gufa, inside the marshland, not like we said before, smucha la'aga. But inside the aga, and again, as we said before, that's her place, that's her local habitat. And she's very confident in herself. She's not afraid, even if she runs after two people and rips them apart and eats them for dinner out of hunger. That doesn't go beyond what we call nature, the laws and bounds of nature. And in that place, only if she attacks two people and kills them, and she has no interest in eating their bodies, or at least she eats one but not the other, that's already a siman muvhak that she's mishulachas. Then the Brisa said that she went up to the Gag, also the Gag v'notla tinok me'arisa. She actually took a baby out of its cradle, zu mishulachas. I think I heard about such a tragedy in Florida with an alligator, I think, not so long ago. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara says, Pshita, why do we need the Brisa to tell me that this is not natural? Certainly it's not natural. A chaya ra has to go into the city by day and then pounce upon a baby. All these three together. Number one, it's in the city. Number two, it's by day. And number three, she drags away a Tino. All this is certainly indicative of the fact that this is Min HaShamayim. This is not your normal behavior. Amarav Papa, you know what the Chiddush is? We're talking about a Gag that on top of the Gag, there was a cradle, a baby cradle. So this Gag was not the roof of a house, but rather kikuche ditzaide. It was like a cave, almost like a small cave. And the hunters used to go into that cave. They dug it out, and then they would trap birds. They would ambush birds when they ran out from the cave. So this cave is not a binyan kavua. It's only used by the trappers on a very temporary basis, and it's outside of the issue. And therefore, if there's an animal, a beast that shows up right next to this cave, and it grabs a human being and eats it, that's not called mishulachas. That's not unusual, because these are kuche ditzaide, which are located, as we said, chutz liyishuv, outside the urban area. And the chiddush here of this brisa, therefore, is that even though it's officially outside of the urban area, nevertheless, if this animal had the chutzpah to go in and take the baby from the kuch, or on top of this roof, where people do inhabit, people live in this roof or in this cave, that makes it mishulachas. That's unusual. And that's a big chiddush. In the English, he says, a hunter's dugout, a makeshift structure that's built outside of the yishuv in uninhabited areas. Such structures in the wild will not frighten off predatory beasts. It's not unusual for them to appear in their environs. Nevertheless, it's unusual for them to climb to the roof of one of these dugouts, or enter it and snatch an infant. That's a sign of divine visitation.
Right.
I don't like the word visitation so much. Sounds like, the divine visit.
Right.
Okay, let's just see if we can at least finish Chaf Beis Amid Aleph. Taner Rabbana, we learned in a brisa that if there are military gedudim, how do you say in English a gedud? I should know this if I remember the number of my gedud. But anyway, battalions, I guess maybe could be a good word. And they came to destroy and they're threatening to destroy the city and kill people. That's a really urgent situation. We have to be masriya. Taner Rabbanan, cherev sha'amru. When the Chacham and Mishnah says masriyim al cherev, eino tzarich lomar, it goes without saying, al cherev she'enu shel shalom. When this battalion of the military are coming to destroy, like the Crusaders, Yimach Shema, olachriach lahalos lahem mas. There's a certain hatred here, an animosity, and they are militants that are representing the gzera, the decree against them, to force them to give up their money. In those cases, it's pashut. That's, you're talking about a negative army, a belligerent army. Ella, the chiddush here of the brisa is afilu cherev shel shalom. Even in the case of a cherev shel shalom, masriyan, we have to be worried about this. What does it mean, cherev shel shalom? Sava over derech malchus zu. No, sometimes you have two nations and they're going through a Jewish neighborhood in order to get from one side to the other. Because they want to battle on the other side of the Jewish neighborhoods, on the opposite side. They're not coming to fight against the Jews on behalf of the kingship, but nevertheless, this is also considered great danger, a makkah mehalechus. I mentioned before the Crusaders, because the Crusaders were actually on their way to the land of Israel, to the Holy Land. But, they stopped by to kill as many Jews as they could on the way. So this is a very dangerous situation when the military battalions are going through Jewish areas. So that's called a makkah ma'aleches and masriyan olem. And now the Gemara proves this. The Brisa proves it. So Paro Necho Hoachim Tzvo Lilochim Melech Ashur. He had no intention of battling against Israel. His agenda, his goal, was to fight against the Assyrians. He just wanted to pass through Jewish territory in order to get to Ashur. And nevertheless, Nichshal Ba Melch Yoshia. If I'm not mistaken, Yoshia refused to allow him to go in, to pass through their land, and as a result, they executed Yoshia. So even that kind of a cherev, where they're just trying to pass through the land, could end up in the loss of Jewish lives. Let me just read you the English here. He says, this is footnote 22, King Yeshayahu fell in a battle against the Egyptian army when he opposed their passage through his kingdom on the way to battle Assyria. That's called Nichshal Ba Melech Yoshia. We have a kina that we read about Yoshio on Tisha B'Av. Shenemar, and the Brisa quotes a pasuk in Divrei Yomim, and here we'll turn to Chav Beis Amud Beis. Vayishlach Elov Malachim Lemar. So Necho sends Yeshayahu messengers. Mali Velach Melech Yehuda. In other words, what do I have to do with you? I'm not coming to attack you. I have no gripes against you. Lo lecha ta'ayom ki el beis milchamti velokim amar levaleni. Not against you that I march on this day, but to the theater of my war, and God has ordered that I hasten. Chadal lechem Elohim asher imi v'al yashchisecha. Do not interfere with God who is with me, so that he will not destroy you. Anyway, we see from this pasuk that Pharaoh, this Necho, he had no desire actually to attack Yehuda. He just wanted to pass through the region, through their land. Nevertheless, Yeshayahu, the king of Yehuda, tried to prevent this passage, was killed in battle. So we see that it's even a dangerous situation when a foreign nation's soldiers are passing through your land in peace, meaning we have no gripes against you. We just need access to reach the other side where our enemies are on the other side. Nevertheless, it's a dangerous situation. Okay, this is where we'll take a break now, and